I'm out here in Pawnee National Grasslands looking for spots to hunt some jackrabbits. So you can find jackrabbits just about anywhere, but once you start looking for, you know, more numbers of jackrabbits, you kind of want to key in on areas that have about waist-high ground cover. So as you can see, the stuff coming off the road, not the best jackrabbit habitat. It might be ankle, shin high, real sparse. Not a whole lot of places for jacks to hide. So you got to keep in mind they're pretty big rabbits. You know, a jackrabbit could weigh 8 pounds maybe. So they need some substantial cover in order to make their habitat suitable. So when I'm cruising these roads back here, there's a lot of checkerboarded public land in Pawnee. Basically, I'm looking for fields that are, first of all, they have to be public, obviously, but also they should have at least waist-high ground cover in some kinds of patch form. Out in these grasslands, there's not a whole lot of habitat like that, so you got to kind of take what you can get. And if you find a public field that has a little bit of that type of cover, it's usually pretty productive to walk it. So we'll see what we can do. We'll see what we can stir up. I was out walking a field just a couple minutes ago and kicked one up. Rabbits are a lot of fun to hunt because you don't have to worry really about the time of day. So they will be more active during dawn and dusk, but it's not like you can't hunt them all day. So they're definitely one of my favorite things to get new hunters out on. Small game is really easy to hunt, and it's fun to walk around with a shotgun, and you do learn kind of like woodsmanship skills. Yeah, it's just a really fun way to get outside. So like I said, we'll see what we can kick up today, and see if I can find a productive jackrabbit hunting field. Alright, so I just shot this jackrabbit out here. All I did was put a little hole in the hide and then threw a carabiner on it, so that way I can hang them as I skin them. So, got the new Benchmade meat craft here. And I'm gonna go in, I'm just gonna pull this hide up on the back and make a tiny incision. And then basically just pull until he's completely naked. So when you're skinning any animal, it's good to have a meat hand, which is this hand for me, and a hide hand. That way you're not touching hide and then getting a bunch of hair all over the meat. Usually I just take the head off with the hide. That'll be snack for a coyote.
Or fly tying material.
Could have been fly tying material. just gonna get both of his legs up on this. So rabbits have really large guts since they're herbivores. And I usually, if you nick anything, it's the bladder, because for some reason their bladder is always full as well. So just be really careful, but it's just kind of standard gutting procedure. I usually pull up on that paunch right there, and then try and use my fingers for as much as I can. You can see how full that bladder is right there. So you really don't want to nick that. So I'm just gonna come in with the tip of my knife there. And just really carefully get that out. So that was the biggest thing with gutting a rabbit for me, is making sure to get that out nice and clean. And then of course, you always want to check the liver for tularemia spots. There's our liver right there, and that looks nice and clean and red. So this is a real healthy rabbit. I'm not worried about. I've never found a rabbit that I would be concerned about. And then as far as kidney and hearts go, if you're the type that likes to eat those things, you can just leave them in the carcass at this point. I generally don't, but we'll just show you. They do have pretty big tickers, so that's a pretty substantial piece of meat, jackrabbit heart. And that's it. That's how I clean it in the field, at least. Kind of cut up there and open that up. You can get the last of these little guts out. That's it. So from here we'll break it down. I'll show you that at home and age it for a couple days, and then we'll cook them. So here's our jackrabbit from the other night. It's been aging for 3 days in the fridge, just in a paper bag in my vegetable drawer. So I'm gonna go ahead and break it down. So with most small game, most of your meat's gonna be coming from the back legs here, but jackrabbits are big enough that we'll be able to get portions from the back legs, from the saddle, and then I'll just do one kind of chuck portion. So we're going to start just by taking the feet off. You just got to find the joint with a big knife, crack through it. We'll do the same with the front, but since this front shoulder was damaged when it got shot, we'll just take off the little shank portion. Okay, so now we've got them feet off. You can also use meat scissors or anything like that to take the feet off. This is just a knife that I have for breaking bones and things like that. So when it comes to cleaning animals that have a little bit of fur, water should always be avoided. The better method is just taking a paper towel And this is because the water will actually spread hair and bacteria into little nooks and crannies that you'll never see. So take your time when you're skinning, and it shouldn't be too bad. But as you're going, just use a paper towel. Okay, so here's the jackrabbit ready to be portioned. And here's how we're gonna do that. So basically we wanna take the back legs off whole, because that's where a majority of our meat's gonna be. And to do that, you just wanna flay it open and just keep your knife rolling along this seam here. And you'll get down to this ball joint. I can tell this leg is a little broken. So we have our two back legs. This is going to be the majority of our meat here. And anytime I can pull off just like the little layer of connective tissue like that, which the aging process really helps with, I will, because that's a lot of times that's where dirt and hair hides. The little pieces that you can't see. So we'll set those out of the way. Now, the only reason why I'm using this knife is because when you're cutting animals, you want to keep one. I like to keep one knife that's for breaking through bones or heavy bone use, and one knife that's for meat. So I'm using this. This is just a wasabi, like a $30 basically fish cleaver, and then this is the Benchmade meat crafter. So we're just gonna go up, break through all these ribs. So as you can see on this portion here, there's not a ton of meat. If I wanted to take it off the bone and get a little scrap of meat, I could, but if anything, this is going to be made into stock. So at this point, I like to kind of take my meat cutting knife and score around my portions. I'll get 3 portions out of this saddle. And then just finish that cut with the boning knife, or the bone breaker. Do the same here. Let's just clean up any inside stuff. Here are the tenderloins, the other part of the tenderloins. That's basically it. Tip for vac sealing. So the saddle portions generally have sharp edges from the bones that you cut. So I like to wrap in aluminum foil or plastic wrap before vac sealing so they don't puncture the bag, because these edges will be kind of sharp. Alright, so we're gonna just, normally I like to serve the hind quarters as the actual edible portion, and I'll use the loin portions for doing things like we're about to do, where it's kind of incorporated into a sauce. Just because with jackrabbit, if you have to cook it to 165, you're not going to get a very tender, juicy loin. So we're going to start by sous videing the hindquarters. So I will go ahead and put them in my vacuum bag. And I'm gonna go ahead and put in a pat of butter, 1 bay leaf, a couple hot red chilies, and just a few peppercorns. So we'll have that vacuum sealing. So basically the idea behind sous vide is that, which is this machine here, all it's doing is circulating water at whatever temperature you set it at. So we're going to be able to perfectly cook these hindquarters to 165, and they'll be nice and tender and juicy and taste like anything we put in the bag. So generally I don't use sous vides for like a single steak or something like that. But if you're doing larger cuts of meat or small game, I think that they're handy little tools in the kitchen. So I had this set at 165. We'll plunk it in there for probably 2 hours. You can hear my vacuum machine about to go off. So it's really convenient to have a vacuum machine and a sous vide for this process, but I understand not everybody does. If you wanted to replicate this without these tools, you could just slow cook it in fat and get the same kind of product at the end. I might use like half butter, half oil at that point, and then just leave it nice and slow. So we'll leave that for about 2 hours and go ahead and start cooking the rest of this up into a pasta sauce. And yeah, it should be really tasty. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and start the pasta sauce here. I've got our Jackrabbit loin sections. I've got 2.5 ounces of sun-dried tomatoes, 3 cloves of garlic, diced, 3 sprigs of rosemary, half a medium onion diced, and about 1.5 ounces of Parmesan cheese, and then 2 bay leaves and a few hot peppers here. So I've got my cast iron Dutch oven heating up. I'm just going to add some canola oil. I'm going to go ahead and salt these loins pretty liberally. And I'm not going to add pepper at this point because when I'm searing them this hot, the pepper will just burn off. So I'm just going to go ahead start browning those. And while those brown, I'm just going to get the rest of these ingredients kind of ready to go. Won't take a whole lot. I'm going to leave 1 sprig whole, just so it can incorporate flavor, and then I'll take it out of the sauce at the end. Okay, so our loins are browning in here. You can see we're getting a nice crust developed on there. And these are going to slow cook, so I'm not really worried about them overcooking at this point. I'm just worried about color. Going to add some of these herbs here. Start releasing some of those oils. And once they look pretty brown on both sides, go ahead and add the rest of the ingredients here. Okay, so now that the veg has started to kind of sweat out and become translucent a little bit, we're going to go ahead and add a good tablespoon of tomato paste. Mix that in. So you always want to cook tomato paste before you add any liquid because it'll kind of retain a metal taste unless you cook it out. So this step's pretty important. So just, maybe a minute. Okay, now that that's cooked down, I'm going to add a 28-ounce can of fire-roasted tomatoes. I'm going to add the 2.5 ounces of sun-dried tomatoes and the 1.5 ounces of cubed Parmesan. This is just going to melt into the sauce, so I don't have to really worry about how big the chunks are. And then I'm going to add a couple blocks of frozen bison demi-glaze. So this would probably be about the equivalent of 2 cups of beef broth. And those will just kind of melt down. And then I'm going to reduce the heat on that, cover it, and then that'll simmer for probably 2.5 hours at this point, but it's going to be kind of dependent on how big your pieces are. So you just want it to be fork tender. So 2.5 hours is a good starting point to start checking it, and then after that, it shouldn't take more than 3 or 4 hours. So at this point, the rabbit was tender enough to pull off the bone, and I just pulled it off in chunks and threw it into the sauce. And I'll let that cook for another 10-20 minutes, and then that'll be ready to serve. Okay, so I have my sous vide hindquarters right here. Our sauce is ready to go. And we've got pasta water boiling, so I'm going to go ahead and sear these hindquarters. All I did was take them out of the bag and threw a little salt on them. I've got canola oil, ripping hot. Since they're already cooked, we're just looking to develop some color. And there you go. That's how I hunt, process, and cook jackrabbits. That one rabbit fed 3 people that night with leftovers, so they can make a pretty substantial meal. I hope you all learned a thing or two from this and maybe even got the motivation to go out and get a jackrabbit of your own. They're a lot of fun to hunt, they're easy to find, and they're a pretty big target, so get out there and get chasing them.